Welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I'm Peter Gross, co-host of the original Wild Kingdom with Marlin, Perkins, and Jim Fowler. For more than 50 years, Wild Kingdom explored wildlife and our natural world. Tonight's episode, and many others, focus on the timeless value of wildlife conservation. Wild Kingdom played a critical role in changing public attitudes about the importance of animals for the health of our planet and our own quality of life. We challenge viewers to learn about animals and get involved in conservation in their local communities. That call to action resulted in more visits to local zoos, nature preserves, and even observing animals in their natural habitats. And that connection with animals benefits all of us in the Wild Kingdom. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. Mutual of Omaha.
Hello, welcome to Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And I might add, welcome to an adventure the likes of which I've never before experienced. Today, we're exploring the fabulous Yellowstone National Park, 3,500 square miles of Wild Kingdom in the northwest corner of Wyoming and extending into Montana and Idaho. Nature ran wild in these mountains, and millions of Americans have traveled the famous road from Mammoth Hot Springs down through the steaming geyser basins to Old Faithful and around the Grand Loop past the lake and the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River. In summer, the park is crowded with visitors, but all winter long the roads are closed except for this one across the northern edge. The rest is a cold, silent whiteness. There are only 3 ways to penetrate this vast winter wonderland: by helicopter, snowmobile, or snowshoes. And I used all 3 when I went there at the invitation of the National Park Service. The only way in is through the north gate at Gardner, Montana. So let's go in to see what happens when winter comes to Yellowstone. Park headquarters is at Mammoth Hot Springs, close by the great steaming terraces. At the famous landmark known as Liberty Cap, we meet Park Superintendent John McLaughlin. He's laid out a busy schedule for us. And right now our guide, Jim Godbolt, is waiting for us to take us on the first leg of our journey by snowmobile. It promises to be quite a ride. With the roads buried under snow, all Yellowstone becomes a wilderness. And when we reach Norris Geyser Basin, we find nature, the artist, at work. Steam from the boiling springs rises into the cold air and rides the winter winds to create a fantasy forest. A buffalo herd spends the winter here. A little frost on the windshield doesn't seem to bother them. And the warm water running off from the springs must feel quite... The beauty of the snow is lost on the elk, who must clean it away to find food. Also wintering here are the graceful trumpeter swans. For other animals, winter is a hardship. But for the otter, it's sheer fun. Fresh out of the water, he dries himself off in the snow. Here's a snowball. Better keep a sharp lookout for predators. Now about this snowball. Maybe it's good to eat. That rabbit obviously doesn't know how to play. Too bad. There's nothing like a romp in the snow. Overhead, a bald eagle seems to disapprove. But who cares when you can turn yourself into a toboggan? Now, Mr. Beaver seems to be having trouble standing on the ice. He lacks the otter's bag of tricks. Too bad he can't turn that tail into a sled. The otter takes his fun where he finds it, but the beaver is strictly all work and no play. All that activity makes a fellow hungry, so the otter finds a hole in the ice and goes fishing. And this is another sport in which he excels. When winter comes to Yellowstone, food is hard to find. A little squirrel eats bark. His hoard of nuts and seeds is buried under the snow. For the moose, there are no green shoots. They must get what nourishment they can from the bare branches and winter buds. Elk come down from the high hills to winter in these lower valleys, where they can forage under the snow for what grass there is. Mule deer suffer the most. Smaller and weaker than the elk, they consistently lose out in the competition for available food. The story is told by trees stripped bare as high as the elk can reach. Only through a program of game management and range conservation will any of the animals survive. Most famous of Yellowstone's many attractions is Old Faithful Geyser. She plays on an average of once every 65 minutes. And true to her name, she's never missed a performance as long as she's been observed. Snow covers the boardwalk, but not the ground at the fountain paint pots. Merrily, they bubble away, kept boiling by the tremendous heat generated in the volcanic furnace below. One of the biggest attractions in Yellowstone National Park is Old Faithful. Let's watch the performance. There she goes. You sure can depend on Old Faithful to perform right on schedule. And over the years, millions of people have. When winter comes to Yellowstone, the natural feeding range of the great elk herd is greatly reduced. To prevent overpopulation and to ensure survival of the elk and the other animals that share the range, the National Park Service each year moves some of the elk out of the park to other areas. But to move elk, you have to capture them, and that's quite a job. The elk are scattered across the hills and valleys foraging for food. Park rangers take off in helicopters to comb the range and round them up. Then the helicopters drive them down these long fenced leads into the neck of the trap, which is hidden by this grove of aspen trees. From here, they're herded into the holding pen. Believe me, it's a wild chase, so hang on, it's roundup time in Yellowstone. The morning is cold and cloudy as we join Chief Biologist Bob Howe. He's the man in charge of the elk management program. I'm to ride as observer in one helicopter while Bob directs the drive in the other. These fellows have tried many different methods of herding elk, and they say that because of the way it can hover, a helicopter is just the right horse for this roundup. Pilot Swede Nelson has been a copter cowboy on nearly every one of these drives. He knows these hills the way a taxi driver knows his town. It's nearly 20 miles to the trap area. We'll be in constant radio contact to coordinate our movements as we fly a set pattern searching for the elk. Swede says they could be hiding out in any of 1,000 places. We may have to cover a lot of territory, but what magnificent territory it is. Elk already? No, these are buffalo, part of the great herd that winters in the lower valleys of the park. Swede skillfully brings us down for a closer look at these rugged bison, plowing along through more than 3 feet of snow. Some have been tagged with brightly colored neck bands, which observers can read from the air in tracing the herd's migrations. It's easy to see why feeding here is difficult for any animal. We've spotted our first elk. We can expect to find them in groups numbering from 2 or 3 up to a dozen or more. From now on, both pilots have their work cut out for them, pulling in the scattered groups to form the drive. As expected, we're bringing in mostly cows and calves and a few young bulls. During winter, the great stags go off and live alone. We won't see many of them. Here's a vivid reminder that the elk is as strong as it is beautiful. Now they're beginning to move down the slopes toward the valley where the trap's located. It takes skillful maneuvering to hold the elk on course. Bob Howe's copter works to keep the herd moving forward, while Swede and I patrol outside to bring in the stragglers. Suddenly, Bob's pilot, Mel Calloway, calls our attention to something. It's a coyote, and it looks as though he might have been stalking a rabbit, but our whirling rotor is enough to frighten him and his quarry. It's pretty clear these two want no part of this bird either. Besides, Bob wants us back on the job. So we're on our way. Our copter cowboys really have to ride herd now. It's 3 more long, rugged miles to the trap, and it looks like we've got at least 125 elk under control, or nearly under control. It's going to take some skillful flying to bring them all in together. The weather's beginning to close in on us now, but fortunately we're nearing the end of the trail. Bob Howe flashes a big smile of success as the elk move in between the fences that will lead them into the trap. The elk probably feel that the aspen grove affords them protection from the pursuing copters, but it's actually a trap, surrounded by strong fence. The long drive has left them winded, but there's still plenty of spirit left. At the far side of the grove is the entrance to the big holding pen. The downdraft from our rotors really kicks up a snowstorm as we set down at the trap entrance to close the gates. This has to be done quickly before the elk find their way out again. The gates need to be securely fastened. A charging elk could make a fast getaway through any weak point in the trap. There's only one way left to get in, and we have to hurry to close the holding pen gate. We've made it in time, and Bob says it looks like one of the biggest drives of the winter. With the elk trapped in the holding pen, the rangers have the situation well under control. After the elk have been driven into the trap, they're held in this holding pen overnight so they'll quiet down. Then groups are cut out and channeled through a series of chutes into individual stalls. Next, one at a time, they're held in a squeeze cage where they're checked for disease and tagged. During the drive, we saw how easily these bright collars can be observed from the air. Various colored bows identify the place and year of tagging. The number tags identify the individual elk. Thus, records are kept of the elk's life history and migrations in and out of the park. But now the rangers are ready to begin processing the elk. First, they have to be drawn out of the holding pen and herded into the chutes. The elk aren't very cooperative, but we managed to cut out a small group and pack them tightly in the chutes so they don't have room to rear up and hurt themselves. The first step is to remove antlers so they won't get caught in the squeeze cage farther down the line. The flexible wire saw does the job quickly, and it's no more painful than cutting your fingernails. This bull would have soon lost his antlers anyhow, since he sheds them every winter. From the chutes, the elk move into the holding stalls and then into the squeeze cage. The gates are raised to let the elk through, then lowered to hold one animal in each stall. Here's our first customer. He's been here before, but his number is recorded and his teeth checked to determine his age. A livestock inspector takes a blood sample which will be tested for brucellosis, a disease which affects unborn calves. Since this one's been tagged before, it's released to rejoin the herd, and mighty happy to be free again. Here's one without a tag. After a check to be sure it's free of disease, it will be trucked to some other area which has a smaller elk population. Up the truck ramp and off to a new home where there's less competition on the winter range. The processing goes on. Some elk are shipped away. Others return to the great herd that is one of the richest treasures of Yellowstone. Winter visits Yellowstone in many moods. And a quiet walk in the snow can be a rewarding experience. A little mule deer is skittish. Buffalo are more stoical. No matter how bitter the wind and how deep the snow, they seem as content as when grazing on a summer pasture. For the deer, though, winter spells real hardship. This one's lost her footing. She's all right, though, just shaken up a bit. Every change in the weather brings fresh beauty. And one of the true beauties is a last year's fawn. Oh, there's another one. And still another. They're unmistakably mule deer. You can tell by the enormous ears. They're about 9 months old. They've lost the spots they were born with, but they haven't lost their love of fun and frolic. In fact, they're as playful as the otter. They're being watched by a bobcat. But there's safety in numbers. The cat might well attack one of them alone, but this seems a little too much for him to get involved in. But a passing skunk wades right in. Out of the way, Buster. When a skunk holds his tail up, he means business. But the fawns are still feeling playful. How do you get through this roadblock? One more to go, and then the skunk can be on its way. The walls of Yellowstone's Grand Canyon echo to the sound of falling waters. And often echo to another sound, as the cry of the coyote pierces the silence of winter that has come to Yellowstone. Winter or summer, Yellowstone is unique in many ways. It was America's first national park, and it is still the largest. Nowhere else can you see such a wealth of North American wildlife in such a spacious natural environment. And nowhere else does nature put on such a dazzling display of geysers, hot springs, and other thermal fireworks. We all owe a debt of gratitude to the far-sighted men who conceived the idea of setting apart this natural wonderland for the enjoyment of all. And we owe a continuing debt of gratitude and our active support to the men of the National Park Service who dedicate their lives and labor to preserve for all time the scenic and wildlife resources of this majestic province of the Wild Kingdom.
Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom.
Like what you saw? Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more exclusive content. And visit our website at wildkingdom.com.